Hello, my friend, from Serbia, Montenegro, Poland, and other Slavic country, because this channel has been rebranded to all Slavic country. And today we have something by a channel that I discovered recently called ESC Blue, who's gonna tell us about the split between Serbia and Montenegro at Eurovision Song Contest, why it happened, I guess, and the story behind it. So let's go.
The Balkans, home to amazing street food, civilized parliaments, and impossible to pronounce consonant clusters.
Really?
Ljubljaška.
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 Despite being the center of perhaps the most land disputes in history, this region has always had one thing going for it, being pretty damn good at music. From hits to consistent top 5 such
Oh yeah!
this place is full of musical talent. And what if I told you that there was a time when the geopolitics in this region collided so heavily with their passion for music that it might actually have changed world history forever? This is one of the most bizarre stories I have ever heard. And it all connects to a song that you might have actually heard, even if you've never watched Eurovision. But in order to get the full picture, we need to go all the way back to the 1990s.
Really?
So after Yugoslavia broke up in the 1990s, you had lots of new independent countries popping up like Slovenia, Bosnia, Croatia, and of course the union state of Srbija I Crna Gora, or as you might know it, Serbia and Montenegro. And as Yugoslavia was quite a Eurovision powerhouse back in the day, most of these countries were quick to participate under their independent flags. In the case of Serbia and Montenegro, they joined the contest just 1 year after the country was formed, and it was an instant success. In the contest just 1 year after.
I've never seen this flag. This looked like the French flag or the Netherlands. I didn't even know this was the State Union from 2003.
After the country was formed. And it was an instant success. Serbian music legend Željko Joksimovic landed them a second place in their first ever participation. And the success didn't stop there. In the year after, they instead sent a Montenegrin band, No Name, with a song that was my personal favorite from that year. Zauvijek Moja got a very respectable 7th place and enjoys cult status to this day. For example, the instrumental was used for the Love Love Peace Peace interval act from 2016. So at this point, things are looking very good for Serbia and Montenegro at the contest. And surely that success would continue in 2006 when Eurovision was held on Balkan soil for the first time in 16 years. Well... So in order to select their song for Eurovision 2006, Serbia and Montenegro held a national final called Evropesma, or Eurosong in English. A whopping 24 songs were set to compete in the final, with 12 being from Serbia and 12 from Montenegro. And in order to make the voting fair, they also had half the jury members be from Serbia, whereas the other half were Montenegrin. And on top of that, there was also a public televote. Now, heading into the contest, there were two big favorites contending for the win. On the Montenegrin side, you had the band No Name. Remember, the same guys who represented them the year before? This year they had an arguably weaker song, but among the 24 acts that were competing, they were still definitely one of the strongest.
Let's be fair. Competing 2 years in a row? This is weird. Have we ever seen this? A contestant that go 2 times in a row? This is weird. It kind of defeats the purpose of Eurovision a little bit. To have the same band twice in a row. I don't know what you think. It just doesn't feel right to me. Just logically.
Side, you had comedic duo Flamingosi featuring jazz singer Luis. They had already gotten a smash hit in Serbia with their song Ludi Letnji Ples, or as you might know it, Crazy Summer Dance. Sound familiar?
Paris, London, Lisbon, Kiev, Moscow, Prague and Rome, Copenhagen, Bucharest, Crazy Summer Dance.
Yeah, that country ball song from TikTok that has been streamed millions of times today was actually one of the favorites to represent Serbia and Montenegro back in 2006. But in order to win, you need the approval of both the jury and the public. And that's where things get really messy. So after an insanely long show with all 24 acts performing their songs in full, the voting took place. And remember how I said that they tried to make the voting fair by having half the jury members be from Montenegro and the other half from Serbia? Well, it turns out it was anything but fair, because every single jury member on that panel had decided to vote tactically, with the Serbian jurors giving all their 12 points to Flamingosi, whereas the Montenegrin jury gave all their 12 points to No Name. Unfortunately for Serbia though, the Montenegrin jury took it one step further and purposely gave Flamingosi 0 points, whereas the Serbian jury at least threw No Name a couple of points out of fair play. But that's not the worst part, because when the televotes were announced, it turned out Flamingosi had completely smashed it, getting over 3 times as many votes as No Name. But because of the political voting from earlier, that still wasn't enough for them to win overall, and No Name winded up being declared as the winner. But thankfully, none of that mattered, and everyone were just happy and proud to have finally selected their Eurovision entrant.
Oh my god!
We will stop the steal.
So yeah, what played out after the voting were basically the most chaotic scenes I have ever seen.
Oh
in
my
this
god,
contest.
did
People
you-
were booing, throwing things on stage, pushing things over. It actually got so bad that when No Name were called up to do their winner's performance, the producers had to cancel it and ask Flamingosi to go up and perform their song instead, just to calm everyone down. And things wouldn't get any better in the days after the contest. Politicians and media were now getting involved, with the Serbian side of course feeling cheated out of their victory, whereas the Montenegrin side could claim that technically no rules were broken. And since both
Okay, let me give maybe an unpopular opinion. What they both did to me is equally as bad. The Montenegro judge gave 0 to Serbia. So at least they're being like honest. We don't want you to win. We want our song to win. And the Serbian judge just give like 3 points to the Montenegro artist. Is this a big difference? You give 0, you give 3. Yes, at the end, No Name won because of all the 3 points, 5 points, 4 points. But at the same time, it was still unfair to give them only 3 points or 2 points or 4 points. They were still being like really patriotic and not being fair in their judgment. It's just that they didn't go all the way to make it super obvious, but it was still obvious. It's like the government stealing from you, telling you that they are stealing from you, versus giving you a 1% tax cut, and you're like, well, at least they give us something. I think that it's both what the judges did on both sides to me, are equally as bad, if we are being honest. So
had to agree on what song to send, it quickly became obvious that the results of the national final would not stand. In a last desperate attempt to solve the situation, they reached out to the European Broadcasting Union and asked them to declare the winner for them, which the EBU obviously refused. This fighting kept going all the way until the Eurovision submission deadline,
Damn.
and since they still couldn't agree by then, Serbia and Montenegro winded up having to withdraw from the contest completely. Okay, so
Damn.
Serbia and Montenegro had a silly fight over a silly song contest. Big deal. Didn't you say something about a whole country breaking up? Well, you see, I did forget to mention one tiny little detail. So as you might have figured out by now, 2006 was a year when tensions between Serbia and Montenegro were at an all-time high. The independence movement in Montenegro had been growing larger and larger ever since the country was established in 2003. And the protests and political pressure had gotten so massive that it was decided to let Montenegro hold a referendum of independence in 2006. However,
and after that, people will say in the comment, Eurovision is not supposed to be political. Look at this. The jury vote for Montenegro especially were because they were fed up. They wanted to be their own country. Ukraine, Israel. Everything is political about Eurovision. We can lie to ourselves and say that Eurovision is not political. But the voting system, like Finland voting for Sweden, or other country voting for Cyprus, voting for Greece. All of these friendly alliances are political voting. They are not very different from this scandal between Montenegro and Serbia. That scandal is quite similar. to be honest.
The rules were strict. The referendum had to pass with a 55% supermajority, and it was required that at least half of Montenegro's population went to vote. And it was expected to be extremely close.
Hold on a second. Since when a referendum is 55%? I grew up in Montreal, Canada, and we had 2 referendums to get out of to Canada because I live in the French part of Canada, and the referendum in 1995 was like 50.7 to 49.3%. So it was the no that won to separate from Canada, but it was always supposed to be 50% to get the majority, 50.1. Where does that super referendum 55% come from? I've never heard of that.
Feeling unsure over such a major decision. Now what if I told you that this referendum was set to take place on the exact same day as the Eurovision final? Remember, the same Eurovision that Serbia and Montenegro were missing from? And sure, it sounds silly to say that missing out on Eurovision would swing the entire referendum in one way or the other, but then you don't know how close this referendum actually was. On the 25th of May 2006, Montenegrins headed to the polls and the referendum passed with 0.5% of the vote. 0.5% in a small country like Montenegro equals to roughly 2,000 people. There are more people living on my street than were required to prevent this country from breaking up. Is it then unreasonable to think that out of all the voters who were unsure that day but ultimately leaned toward leaving, maybe wouldn't have done that if it wasn't for this whole debacle? If it wasn't for weeks upon weeks of being labeled as cheaters and bad sports? If it wasn't for seeing their homeboys get absolutely humiliated on live TV? If it wasn't for the symbolic value of these 2 countries not even being able to agree on what song to send to a silly song contest?
No way! Because of that, because of Eurovision qualifier 2006, they were able to get above 55%. This is crazy. No way. No way that this scandal is widely separated, ultimately, because of the vote percentage.
On that, but most Serbs and Montenegrins that I've seen discussing this actually seem to lean toward, you know what? Yeah, maybe, or even probably. Every vote counted that night, and an event like this might just have been enough to tip that narrow thin vote over the edge.
Way.
And because of that, world history was changed basically forever. And yet, in some crazy way, that might actually not be the most insane part about this story.
Good evening, Jovana.
Good evening. So from Belgrade, the capital city of Serbia and Montenegro. So as you know, we don't have a song for you this year, but we promise that next year we will give you the best one, the best one, the best one.
No way. No way.
12 points go
Oh my god, it's the year that she won. It's the year that she... Oh no. Oh no. Oh no.
to Serbia.
12 points go to Serbia.
Serbia. Serbia.
First 12 points go to Serbia.
All the Balkan country voted. Even Montenegro. Eh? You need to tell me more about this. This is crazy because it's true. Serbia won the year after with that beautiful song and got 12 points from Montenegro, which is, I think, maybe the most crazy part about this whole video. But I think that the Balkan country, you guys are very supportive of each other at Eurovision. Usually vote for each other. And he made it look like very controversial, but 55% is not a lot. It means that 45% of people in Montenegro wanted to stay in their one country. So it was quite divided, and it was a big scandal. And I feel like the only people to blame is the jury. So thank you for watching, everyone.